Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, and good evening. This is WeatherBrains episode number 620 for the 4th of December, 2017, the pre-show. The pre-show is tardy. We are starting late tonight, but the show, maybe we'll get it done on time. So had a little talk, had to do up on Metro here, so had to run up there, run back, and but we're here. Kevin is here. Bill is here.
Hi.
The gang's all here. We should mention this is the time of the show where we talk about boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and say outrageous things. Bill is in some Roach Motel somewhere in East Teboga, Illinois.
Wow. Jackson, Mississippi on a Saturday night. Who sang that song, Kevin Selly?
That would be the Birds. I don't know.
No,
Charlie Daniels.
They didn't sing that song. He talked it. That was a talking song. I kicked old Green Teeth in the knee. The song was called Uneasy Rider. Uneasy Rider by the Charlie Daniels Band.
Wow.
I bet you Kevin has played that. He's put that out of his mind.
Yeah. I don't remember any songs anymore.
That would be an easy one to forget.
So I got a note here about Spotify. What does this say here? Submit your podcast to Spotify now. The new Spotify destination is here. Reach Spotify's 140 million active users across 60 territories around the world. Wow. So I will submit WeatherBrains to Spotify whenever I have time, which might be in 10 years.
We might get some credibility.
You submit. It says all music in your podcast must be pod safe.
Oh, Lord.
So I guess that means that I can't play songs like this.
While I watch the cannons flashing, I clean my gun and dream of Galveston.
Yay. My theme.
Eli, run! Eli, run!
Eli's here.
Oh, you still can.
Get out while you can.
Hey, Eli.
Hey, Kim, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. I haven't seen you since.
So we don't have to pronounce your name anymore. We get to say McLean now, huh?
You can. I'm sorry, what?
Are you switching?
Professionally, I am hyphenating, so you all get to enjoy all the consonants. I'm doing the Cloco McLean. It's probably backwards to y'all.
I had to buy a bigger name tag for you there.
Great. You can call me whatever. I'll answer to either name.
That sounds like a big biochemical company, Cloco McLean.
Yeah.
It's all part of my world domination strategy. I'm getting there.
Well, that's exciting. Did it go well, the ceremony and everything?
It did, and you missed last time. It did rain on my wedding day.
Oh.
So we did talk about, though, that's a lucky thing. So this should ensure, a good, happy, long marriage.
No, I married a television meteorologist as well in Virginia, and we kind of laughed because the outer edge of our area was Charlottesville. This was in Richmond and Albemarle County, as I recall. But we kind of laughed because literally all of the television meteorologists in the market were at our wedding, but there was severe weather knocking on the door that night. So,
oh, geez, that sounds fun.
And we made it okay.
So welcome to our television viewers. It is now 30 minutes after the hour, and we are on the TV side.
No one cares about that. Kim and I are sharing wedding stories.
Well, that's true. I mean, that's the boring personal stories part of the pre-show here.
Wedding brains.
Exactly. So we're Mrs. Rick, and I guess Aubrey will be on here shortly because she submitted a pick of the week. Let's roll this thing. Could it be we're actually starting on time?
Wow. World's coming to an end.
It is, exactly. So here we go. I'm sure I got my act together here.
He's forgotten how to count. He's so amazed we're starting on time.
Yeah, no, this is like taking my breath away. Here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is WeatherBrains episode number 620 for the 4th of December, 2017. show that's all about weather. I have a funny feeling we're gonna have a good show tonight because look who's back. Kevin Selly. Welcome back.
How are you?
Where have you been, man?
Well, last week at this time, I was along the Mississippi Gulf Coast. I was visiting a friend in Biloxi and Gulfport, and it was a good time. We had nice, cool weather. There was a cold front had come through, but what was really amazing is we drove, I think it's Highway 90. Is that right along the coast?
Yes.
Yeah, we drove up and down there several times and looking at various things and visiting all the small towns and so on and so forth. But it was really stunning to see all of these vacant lots right along the highway with these big, old oak trees and whatnot, but all the lots are empty and they were all swept by, Katrina or the abandoned, whatever was left. But they're 12 years on now, and there's just starting to be a little bit of redevelopment of some homes up on stilts this time, along the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And it was really just, I really appreciated seeing it, because that area was sort of forgotten. There always seems to be some sort of forgotten area in some of these bigger storms, and that one was. And so it was a pleasure to be there.
Awesome. I have not been on the Mississippi Gulf Coast in probably 25 years, so I would love to go see what it looks like. You didn't gamble when you were down there, Kevin, did you?
No, we walked in a couple of casinos just to kind of see. It's been years since I was in a casino, so it was fun to walk through, but you can't spend much time in those, in my opinion, because they allow you to smoke in there, and I'm sure they're moving the air through as best they can, but it just smells like smoke because they don't want the smokers to leave their slot machines for a smoke break, so they let them smoke in there, which is kind of unfortunate.
Now, Brian, when you gamble, do you smoke or not?
Wow, talk about a loaded question.
So, Brian, how's life in your world?
Turning much colder.
Yeah, we got a weather change. We'll talk about that in the weather roundup here. But it's,
about time. We haven't really had that much chilly weather. I mean, we've only had a couple of freezes. So
buckling big time.
Aubrey
Urbanowitz.
We did 81 today. Sorry.
What? Wow.
We did 81. We started at 62. The dew point started at 62 this morning. Last time I checked, it was 42. But yeah, we were at 81, and we'll be in the 40s tomorrow. So we'll have at least a 30-degree difference.
Blue Northern.
None of that has anything to do with Aubrey, who is trying to talk.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
Hi, guys.
Hi. Hey, what's the weather? When's the cold air get there?
Cold air should arrive at some point tomorrow night. Man, I was hoping for at least some rain. It is just not. I think we'll be lucky if we can get maybe 0.2 of an inch of rain. This is just not looking good for us. But hope one more mild day. So one more day to get outside, one more day to enjoy before it all turns colder.
I've got to give Aubrey a shout out. My very first Christmas card for 2017 came from Aubrey Urbanowitz.
Wow.
It actually came from the bear.
Well, it came from the bear, but I'll give you credit for it. I recognized your handwriting.
Thank you.
We've got Kim. So you're Kim Cloco McLean. Is that your new name? You're going to use the hyphen there?
I'm going to use the hyphen. Yeah, I'm doing that professionally. I don't want to lose my whole professional identity, And
exactly.
For better or worse, Cloco is really unique. As much as no one can pronounce it or spell it, it's very unique. There's me and there's one Kim Cloco in Canada. She does some sort of like Dungeons and Dragons League. That is not me. I promise.
Secret identity, actually.
There's a show title in there somewhere. I don't know where.
No. So, and I would assume that most in television, Aubrey, you just don't change your name at all. You just keep your maiden name, don't you?
No, yeah, I did not dare. Yeah, after I waited so many years, I did not dare change my name. That was, and I still have half everything under Urbanowitz. I don't know. It's a process. Do you know how difficult it is to change your name on everything? You guys have no idea. No idea.
I'm dreading it. I am really dreading it.
Credit cards, any account, any just little, just CBS photo accounts and little things. I don't know what name anything is under. So
Well, I'll speak for all men and say we're sorry.
thank you, Kevin.
No, you put in so much equity with these names. I totally agree. I mean, I look, it is our fault. But Rick Smith, let's see, Smith is an easy name. So does your wife have a hyphenated name?
No, I refused to change my name when we were married. So it's still Smith. No, my wife's maiden name is Streeter. It's a German name, but everybody pronounces it Strider. So I think she was happy to take on Smith.
Awesome. So what's happening in Norman, Oklahoma, where you, sir, are the WCM of the Weather Service there in Norman?
Well, it's unimaginable that it's already December. We're already filling out our storm spotter training calendar and already starting to think past winter into spring, and it's just got to slow down. It's just crazy how fast the time is going. But yeah, it's we did get that cool air a little bit before Kevin did today, and enjoyed the last few minutes of the upper 70s this afternoon. And people have been asking for winter. Well, here you go.
It was icky this morning, though. 62 dew point in the winter.
Felt like a severe weather day.
I just checked too. When I left here 2 hours ago, the dew point was 42, and now it's 30. So we're dropping fast.
Whoa.
Awesome. So Bill Murray, we got a special guest in here. So bring him in and let's ask Eli about 72.3 million questions.
Yeah, James. Tonight's guest WeatherBrains, the chief of the Forecast Services Division at National Weather Service Headquarters. He's been with us before. He has a million other jobs. I'm going to ask him about all of them tonight. Elliot Jacks, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Bill, and hey, everybody. Real nice to see Kim there. Hi, Kim, and congratulations to you, too.
Thanks so much.
So maybe you can help me out a little bit here during this session, because Kim's been such a close partner with the. And, speaking of names, I've gone through, well, Bill, you just called me Elliot. I really prefer Eli, because my piano teacher told me that Elliot was a very distinguished name when I was like 10 years old, and that was that. So Eli is what I go by. But anyway.
I like Eli, too, but I thought that was a good chance to call you by Elliot.
So what shall we talk about?
Well, first, partners meeting tomorrow up in Silver Spring. Are you going to be there?
I'll be there on Thursday, actually, because that's when messaging and dissemination will be talked about. So yeah, we'll be there and hopefully see somebody there. See you there.
I wish I were going to be there. I got business called me away. I had to let them know I wasn't going to be able to come. I had to cancel my trip, and I ended up in Jackson, Mississippi tonight. So I hope my high-speed internet holds up. I'm not like Brian. I'm not stealing it. I'm actually paying for the premium, and we'll see if it works.
All right then.
So Eli, it's I guess I've never really asked you about your career, how it unfolded, and how you got to where you are today.
Well, thanks for asking. The career was interesting. After my master's degree from Albany State, was SUNY Albany at the time. Always interested in synoptic meteorology. At one point, wanted to be a broadcaster. I did a little bit of radio over time from college for a few years. I worked in aviation forecasting in addition to some public forecasting in the private sector. But then starting in 1986, I was fortunate enough to join the Weather Service and got into development of MOS, NGM MOS, if you remember, and temperatures and probability of precipitation. Really, really interesting. And then, I've always enjoyed teaching. And so I was in the training division for about a decade or a little bit more, coordinating all the training, all the 88D training that happened right at the beginning, all the AWIPS training, all of the training we gave to our SUs, the COMAP courses. The first one was 8 weeks. That was a real boot camp. There were some interesting stories from back there. In the early 2000s, time, like Rick said, time is just flying away, right, Rick? Got involved in the services, and that's been really, really rewarding. I started off just in the fire public winter and severe realm, and in the last few years when we reorganized the headquarters, I cast services division. So I'm about a mile wide and an inch deep, but and also trying to run this hazard simplification project as well. So it's challenging and very rewarding.
So talk about your current job, what that officially entails, your day job.
Well, so in my current job, I oversee what we call 11 service programs. So I can name them all in succession, but they include winter weather and severe weather and tsunami and climate and water resource services and marine and tropical and pretty much all of our service programs. I looked at a few there. And so we have a lot of policy that we have to deal with. You know, of course, this past year we had our warnings implemented. That was a really big deal and unfortunately used too often during the tragic storms of this past summer. The winter weather area is very interesting. Of course, in addition to hazard simplification, we have our new probabilistic snow forecast and an interesting way to express uncertainty. And so that's slowly spreading across the country. We finally went national on impact-based warnings for severe weather. So, you know, that's just a few of the issues. Of course, our new national water model, huge, and at our National Water Center in Tuscaloosa coming online. So a lot of really exciting things going on in the services.
Yeah, I was just down in Tuscaloosa last week and was by the National Water Center. What an impressive facility.
It really is. It really is. Did you see the treadmill in the director's office?
No.
That slow walking treadmill. It's actually a nice model for future office space. You know, about not having to sit all the time and standing desks. And as you said, Bill, really impressive facility.
So Eli, this the simplification process. Tell us how it started and you know what it was born from.
Well, you know, it's really just from a whole career of listening to the public and listening to our own watches and warnings and being involved. You know, the bottom line, the why of this project is there are too many people who don't understand our watch, warning, and advisory terms. And then, you know, to make it worse, we have all these individual messages, which we call products like wind advisory and winter storm watch, et cetera. There's 125 of those. And so, you know, I just thought, why not take a look and see if there are any alternatives. And I've been very fortunate to work with people like Kim and like Gina Esco and others who have, you know, really brought social science to bear. And, you know, the project has really reached a neat point where we have changes to the winter weather suite. In fact, you really saw the map light up with some of our new messages, which I'm happy to explain. And we're looking across the hazards to one of the main social science recommendations is that there are so many individual messaging products. So consolidate those products. And our emergency managers really are well briefed by the time that they hear what we call our bell ringers, you know, the watches, warnings, and advisories. And so just put the details in the message. And so our new format for the winter messages across the winter suite is a what, where, and when format. And so the impacts go into that what section. That's very much aligned with our impact-based new types of messaging, Weather Ready Nation. And, you know, I would add, I got back from Beijing a few weeks ago, where I'm fortunate enough to lead a team that deals with impact-based forecasting, and we are not alone by far in having an interest in impact-based forecasting and focusing on the what and the impact, not just the hazard itself.
So it's like a table of watch, warning, and advisory, but they were pretty brilliant. Because that really, you know, showed the breadth and depth. But the bones of the program are really good, Eli, in terms of the hazards and the significances that make up the VTEC process. I mean, that, you know, it seems to me like the bones are really, really good to that system.
The bones are very good with the system, and they've served the public well for many, many years. And, you know, there are some areas and some programs which are better understood than others. There are also some areas where institutionalized into policy and law. So seriously, in terms of suggesting any change, you know, but the fact remains that, you know, you shouldn't have to go to a dictionary to figure out what it is that we're saying. It should be intuitive. And so really what I'm striving for and what we're striving for in the Weather Service as an organization is for our messaging to be intuitive, clear, actionable, immediately understood. And so,
hey,
yeah.
I'm sorry, Eli, this question may not have an answer, but it sounds foundational, what you're saying. I would love to know how you guys got from, gee, I think we maybe have a messaging problem and a lot of people maybe we kind of feel like don't understand, but there must have been some research or guidance or surveys or something that really kind of solidified. Does that make sense as a question? I guess I'm looking for the foundation point.
Thank you for bridging the gap. That's a fantastic question. And so that's actually where our social science came in. So over the past 4 years or 5 years, things time's melting away, we've had a number of surveys. We had focus groups. We had a huge workshop in 2015 at our National Weather Service Training Center where we had social scientists. We actually had, I believe, 8 of them there. And we had emergency managers, and we had private partners from the Weather, Water, and Climate Enterprise. And we had, of course, our own Weather Service forecasters. When we got the recommendation to start drawing down the suite, consolidating and reformatting, we've been issuing individual surveys, and Kim was actually instrumental in helping us to develop that survey and in getting results from that. And so for the winter changes we made, we got very, very positive results from the proposals to reformat and consolidate as we have. Now, I understand that in the case of freezing rain advisory, for example, you're losing freezing rain in the headline, you're losing lake effect in the headline for lake effect snow advisory. But one of the things I've been saying is that as meteorologists on meteorological causality. So I'll point out 2 things. So if you're driving on a snowy roadway, do you care whether the snow is from a clipper or from the lake? And if your house is flooding, does it matter what exact type of causality or what the label of the flood advisory is? And so it is a transition, and it is a change. And I would point out that we're not making any changes without full stakeholder engagement and without doing these types of surveys to make sure that what we're doing is well received and the right thing to do.
So here's another odd one then. Going back to the change, and I'm just using this as an example from the F scale to the EF scale. My assumption was that a good percentage of people understood F scale. We changed to EF, and I just didn't seem to me like that change was effective. I don't know that people got it. It was my perception, and I have no data to back it up. But when you're going to make a change to all of these big ones, is there a concern? I mean, to all of the categories eventually, is there a concern that people will not make the change, or did they just not understand so much that it doesn't matter? Does that make sense?
Well, going back, you're pushing my limits of expertise, but as I understood it with the change to the F and the EF scale, it was more based on damage indicators and getting the engineering piece of it
right.
more aligned with reality. I'm not sure I understood the second part of your question. Could you repeat?
Well, my sense was that people and a lot of news people didn't really understand. We understand the change from F to EF, but I feel like I still hear people say F scale now. And so I just didn't know if the change was effective, but I felt like people had a sense of what the F scale was. I guess I'm not asking the question very well, but I just wonder, is the current system so confusing that a change, people aren't going to notice a change, or will they notice the change?
Oh, well, okay, I hear what you're saying. See, so there's 2 pieces of this project. The first piece of the project is what we're, with the winter weather products, we have consolidated down to 1 watch and 1 advisory. And we're now looking into doing that for flooding, which the broadcasters I've spoken to were very enthusiastic about. And we're also going to include flash flood warning as an impact-based product, a polygon-based product with tags. and that will enable us to lessen the scope of the WEA alerting, which is a problem. The over alerting of wireless emergency alerts with flash flood warnings. This will enable us to do that. But I may be getting a feel from your question. The first piece of the project is the piece where we're simplifying the message formats and drawing down the number of products as we can.
Yeah.
The second and longer term piece of the project, which I think will go to your question, is to actually examine whether alternatives to especially the terms watch and advisory, which is the most misunderstood term, are warranted. And actually one thing we have going right now that's going to be released pretty soon, not to the public, but it's going to be done through social science channels, is what we're calling a generalizable public survey. And so we are actually going to be testing some new language and seeing how people respond to new language, much as they use in Europe. So we're testing color, we're testing severity language, such as moderate, severe, and extreme, which is common alerting protocol language. This is language that we hypothesize may be more generally understood. And if people don't understand what the word watch means, why not just say snow possible, and have an area that says snow possible? I would wager that more people will understand that than those who may get confused with watch versus warning, because they both begin with WA. So hopefully that's responsive.
No, I appreciate your answer, and I was probably making an apples and oranges comparison, but I appreciate that explanation. Go ahead, Kim.
Thanks.
And you're muted, Kim. There we go.
Yeah, I was really interested, Eli, to hear, now that there is some winter weather that's going on. I'm looking at the national map and seeing some of the consolidated products in action. Have you gotten any feedback yet on those products, how they're being received or acted upon? Just wondering if anybody has reached out to the Weather Service to give their opinion.
Thanks for asking, Kim. Not quite yet. This actually, other than Alaska and some scattered other winter weather we've had so far, as you guys discussed at the top of the show, this is really winter breaking out pretty much for the first time across the contiguous. So I look forward to hearing some results. I have to admit I'm pretty biased, but I'm clicking all over the place looking at the work we did, Kim, and I really like what I'm seeing. I mean, for example, if you look at Marquette, you'll see a winter weather advisory that would have used to have been a lake effect advisory, and across the Great Lakes, you'll see the winter storm watch, which would have been snow watch. And so what I really like, though, are the simplified formats. What I should point out is that in making the formats consistent across the country, consistency is really big with us. It's really important to us that our users, our partners, when they go to a message, they see the same type of information. And so that wasn't the case in the past. Different forecast offices would use different formats and different bullet ordering and different bullets. So now we have the standardized what, where, and when format, and seems pretty clean to me.
Yeah, it does to me too. I'm very excited to see as the system progresses and to see this map really fill in. That was one of the things we thought could be a real benefit, as you would see a more continuous area of clearly just winter weather threat, and people could dig down and get more details. So I'm fascinated too by what you mentioned with China, and it sounds like they're moving toward impacts-based forecasting and communication as well. And you said putting more information in sort of a what formatting. Is that something that they're doing to follow what we're doing? Was that information, was that sort of lessons learned something that they brought to their country? Had they just sort of been doing that completely independently as well? How did that work?
That's a great question. And actually the meeting was in China, but it was attended by countries of at least a dozen places across Asia, across Europe. And I think the point to be made is they're not necessarily following us. They're doing this on their own. But one of the most interesting models that I've seen comes out of UK, where they have something called the truck overturning model. And so they're taking a look at a threat as a function not only of the hazard, but of the exposure and the vulnerability of individual, whether it be highways or whatever else. And the point that they make is that the the worst travel area may not be where the hazard is the worst. There's, they're starting to factor in all kinds of other information other than just the weather. And that's, of course, a big leap forward, and it's very challenging to do in a holistic type of way.
Let me ask you a question. Is there any work being done to improve consistencies between local weather service, CWAs, when it comes to issuing these advisories? Because some offices have different strategies, and sometimes they don't mesh well. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Is there any work being done to improve the consistency from one CWA to the next?
Well, that's a great question, James, too. And let me, actually, the nature of the question goes to part of the motivation of what we did. So let's take the freezing rain advisory versus the winter weather advisory for a second. So the definition of the freezing rain, of course, is all freezing rain. Winter weather can be any mixture of winter precipitation or snow. And as some of my regional service chiefs say, what we've eliminated now by making it all one winter weather advisory is all this time that forecasters are spending trying to decide which one of these things they should issue, and then sometimes having discontinuities across the boundaries. By putting the key information in the what, you can update the message without having to cancel and reissue the message, which adds to the confusion of the messaging. So this type of a more unified approach can minimize this type of discontinuity that I believe you're referring to.
So Eli, will you then thin down the phenomenon codes inside the VTEX? Will they all be funneled into just winter weather, or will they still exist? And will you replace that with some sort of tag in the message for automated systems?
Well, for winter, for example, what we're doing is we're picking winter storm watch, that VTEC code, and then all the lake effect snow watch product is issued using the winter storm watch code. But as we go more into common alerting protocol, and this is really key, we have new software that's coming into Weather Service. It's called Hazard Services Software, but it's going to be a revolutionization, there's a word for you, of how we issue our messages. Right now, our forecasters use 3 different types of software, and we're going to be able to use one, all of them Polygon enabled, and all of them able to forward define urgency, severity, and certainty. And the only places that we're doing that right now are in our impact-based warning messages that we have out for severe thunderstorms, tornadoes, and special marine warnings. When we implement our new flood suite, which will consolidate everything down and issue flash flood warnings by impact-based warnings, they too will have tags. And so, Bill, the answer to your question is yes on at least one piece of it, that the use of tags so that we can really refine the urgency, severity, and certainty, perhaps rather than referring solely on the VTEC code, which are hardwired in terms of defining urgency, severity, and certainty, that's going to be a real giant leap. And it's going to take some time to all sort it out. But the way I see it in the future, there'll be 2 types of products. There'll be long-term products, for example, our winter weather messages, and the short duration products, the ones that are really going to come to get you, whether they be tornadoes, severe thunderstorms, snow squalls, or dust storms, which are new products that we're going to be issuing next year, also in impact-based format. All of those are going to have the capability to feature tags that can define differential severity and really fine-tune it from a geographical standpoint.
Now, it seems like the watch warning advisory nomenclature is under fire, and arguably, justifiably so. Interestingly, when we were developing a system for our hotels, we started out with, it doesn't say watch warning or advisory anywhere in the message. It's a simple text message that comes based on the Polygon or the county-based, watch or warning, depending on what it is, that started out with be aware for, an outlook, went to heads up for an MCD, went to get ready for a watch in an advisory situation, and then went to take action and emergency for warnings. And the only thing they got was that advice followed by what the hazard was. And so it has been very, very effective. And this was done, in a vacuum, not knowing what you guys were doing at the time. But it sounds like some of that may be coming in what you might be doing in the future. Is that true?
That's exactly the type of language we're testing. And so, of course, the United Kingdom uses. You mentioned Be Aware. They have a 4-color system. So it's green for no hazards, yellow is Be Aware, orange is Be Prepared, and red is Take Action. Now that meteor alarm system is used in the numbers increasing. 37 countries at least across Europe. Not all of them use that same language, but they all use the same color-coded system. And so the idea of saying, instead of a winter weather advisory, what about a level orange warning? Could we get people used to, people understand stoplights, and people, I guess orange isn't in a stoplight, but if you have a yellow, orange, red, and perhaps magenta purple system, which some countries do use already. Barbados of the Bahamas is actually one of them. With a limited color system with clear language, maybe saying the color for the colorblind, is that an option? Another option is to base the language just on the severity. So you could have a moderate X warning. So where X could be a winter storm, or it could be a thunderstorm. And let me point out something else. For the derecho back in 2011, when one of our broadcasters at our focus groups was told the story that he was unable to get on the air for the derecho because the product was a severe thunderstorm warning. And, the rather savvy news director said, well, it's just a severe thunderstorm warning. It's a tornado, not a tornado warning. So why should we put you on the air? So we don't have the ability, even if it's a 1/4 inch of ice at rush hour, or a 1/4 inch of snow compacted, we don't have the capability to say this one is different. And so if we provide the flexibility to put out, say, a purple, an extreme warning, types of situations. So imagine an extreme thunderstorm warning, a thunderstorm advisory, and a thunderstorm warning. Imagine a 3-tiered system where you really could differentiate between the severity of thunderstorms. So, these are just some of the things we're looking at.
Some broadcasters say that, the SPS, which in most offices carries a polygon when it involves a thunderstorm, but doesn't have a hazard code or phenomenon code, I guess. It's still a useful product if it's polygon based and has an expiration time for the public who might be, susceptible to a thunderstorm, whether that's lightning or, just having a thunderstorm in the area. So I was glad when our local office in Birmingham started using polygons on their SPSs, because we use that, like in our product, to tell our hotels that, hey, something's coming your way and you need to at least be alert to it.
Right. And the use of SPS has been effective in that way. It has, as you mentioned, it doesn't have a VTEC code associated with it. And so one of the things I would suggest that we do is, as we move to any evolving system, is to treat all hazards the same in terms of how we code them. And if there's differential urgency or severity, say that or indicate that in the tags. But in a way, we've used the special weather statement product as the way to say, gee, we don't know how to format this, so we'll use that type of an approach. And so, that's maybe a smaller issue. Our hazardous weather outlook, kind of the same. What we want to do is provide our forecasters with the capability to say whatever they think as soon as they know it, in a way that's easily conveyed and understood.
Well, Rick Smith and I only want to know one thing, Eli, and is that whether you're going to bring back the Traveler's Advisory. That's
no, sir. No,
my childhood.
I remember that puppy. Yeah. No Traveler's Advisory.
Hey, Eli. So you made some adjustments in hydrology and winter weather. The question is, what about the timing on adjustments with tropical and convective? When does that happen?
Aha. Well, let me back you up just a second, James. We also want to take a look at non-precipitating, so heat and cold and wind, visibility hazards. Should we coin one visibility category, a visibility warning, to cover fog, smoke, ashfall, other types of visibility hazards? Now, I'll tell you one thing that's happened to us. We've been surveying on marine, and we've run into some institutional issues. The surveys for marine to, say, gale and storm and heavy freezing spray, and trying to consolidate all those into a marine warning has met with some resistance. And the reason for that, some of these products are embedded in treaties that are international in nature. And in some areas, especially in Alaska, the headlines are very important. Some of it has to do with radio transmission and how important it is to hear the term in the headline. So we're investigating some other alternatives there. So marine and non-precipitating are next up. Now, severe and tropical, if you think of the consolidation concept, for example, drawing down the number of products, which I think, as you know, James, and I remember your talk, I think it was at the Broadcasters Conference, your impassioned plea to reduce the number for water, and I heard you, and we're doing it. Hopefully by around a year from now, we'll have that implemented. But severe and tropical are already pretty much consolidated already. We don't have to draw them down. The communities understand the warnings and the watches fairly well. And so, as I mentioned, what I like to see for severe, a really extreme category for a derecho, for 80 plus, or for whatever hail size you choose. Tropical, again, very, very difficult because of all of our hazards. Tropical warnings are institutionalized. They're well understood. And so then the $64,000 question is, do we treat some hazards or most hazards and leave others alone, or do we do the whole thing consistently? And that's the kind of thing that keeps me up at night. But reasonable people would have made the argument to me that the tropical program is fine. You don't need to touch it. And I get that. But one of the things I'm looking forward to doing is I'll be traveling down to the National Hurricane Conference in March and collecting some feedback on that from emergency managers and others. And I'm just looking to do the right thing here, and it all has to be based on feedback and from surveys and from stakeholders.
Let me ask you back to convective, because I live in a convective.
I'm sorry, James.
So I'm sorry, Bill, for I guess maybe for Kim and for Eli, the term tornado emergency. And Rick Smith, I'll ask you the same thing. Where do we go from here with that? And Kim, maybe you're the one I don't know. Is it a good thing? Is it not a good thing? Does it lessen the meaning of a tornado warning? I'd just like to hear from you on tornado emergency. Does it stay? Does it go? What do we need to do with that?
I'd love to actually start with Rick on this one, since the Norman Forecast Office is where this term was really born. It was created in the May 3rd, 1999 tornado outbreak, when that tornado was heading for the Oklahoma City metro area. And the forecasters sitting in the hot seat felt that they had to do something extraordinary to say, this is going to be very, very bad. You need to take action with this. So Rick, I'd love to start with your experience with it, especially being from the office that you serve.
Yeah, my boss is the one that kind of invented that. There was no social science, there was no focus groups or surveys. It was spur of the moment. We have to tell people this is going to be different. And the phrase wasn't really used that often. And I can't even remember when it began being used in other places. It only recently became kind of institutionalized within the Weather Service, where there's actually it's in the rule book, it's in the directives. But I know there's a lot of discussion and debate about the term, about, if you're able to really reserve it. Like in our experience, we've been able to really reserve it, and we've only had a couple of real false alarms with it. When we say it, I mean, it does get a reaction from the TV stations and the people that are helping to amplify and get the message out there. What normal people think when they hear that, I don't know. To some people, every day is a tornado emergency in May here, but that's another show. But anyway,
that's a show title, by the way.
There you go. But I don't know. I know results around the country with it. I mean, there's been sometimes it's used a lot, and there's different opinions on when it should be used and how it should be verified. So our local experience has been pretty favorable. I know my boss sometimes regrets, if he could turn back time, he might not ever start all this mess. But for us, it's been fairly successful.
Do you know, tornado emergencies, were they supposed to be eliminated with impact-based warnings? Are you supposed to use the impact-based warning language instead of tornado emergencies now?
Well, tornado emergency is built into the impact-based warnings. So of the different tiers of tornado warnings, there's a radar indicated tornado, there's an observed tornado warning, then there's the considerable tag when we have a tornado that's doing damage or capable of producing damage. And then the highest level you can go is the catastrophic. It would say catastrophic tag at the bottom in the tag section of the warnings, but the language in the body of the warning would say tornado emergency. So it was built in to the impact-based warning system.
Okay, that's great. I couldn't remember how that had all fleshed out. When tornado emergencies come up, I can't help but think of Patrick Marsh and all the work that he did following the 2011 tornado season. And these questions started rising about, should we move toward impact-based tornado warnings? And he thought, well, the best way to explore that question is to look at the closest thing we have now, which is these tornado emergencies. And the Weather Service did end up offering some guidance. There were directives for what those were supposed to imply. It was supposed to be both a situation where you were very certain a tornado existed and that it was going to impact a lot of people. So you should see a case where these verify with very strong EF scale tornadoes and your false alarm ratio is almost 0 and your hit rate is almost 1. What he found was that they sort of peak at about an EF2. That's where most tornado emergencies verify at that level. The false alarm ratio does go down for those. So there's some ability for forecasters to discriminate cases where the tornado is more likely, but they're not necessarily able to always forecast cases where the tornado is going to cause EF4, EF5 level damage, which is what that was supposed to be geared toward, is something, toward that end of the scale. So that's one of the reasons why the impact-based warnings have been contentious, and tornado emergencies, I know, have also been contentious. There's an idea that possibly they're overused in urban areas. So if that's your directive, that you want to be very confident that there both is a tornado and that it will hit something, you're going to want to issue them when they're close to something to hit, which will probably be an urban area. They have been used sometimes for rural tornadoes. I think it was used, for example, on the Greensburg tornado day. I think that was a tornado emergency, May 4th, 2007. Yeah. So it's been used for some notable cases like that. But by and large, I believe that I need to look up the study. I believe that there was a study done that showed that there was some population bias to their use, which raises the question, do rural lives matter? And I think that's an important question.
Yeah, now I'll bring that up. That's another point of contention, is how do you verify these? I mean, you would think that, well, if you issue a tornado emergency, you're going to verify that with violent tornado damage, EF4, EF5. But is that really how to grade it? Is that really how to verify it? Because in the forecaster's mind, I mean, we've issued tornado emergencies before where there was no doubt that if this tornado continues on its present path, and we did one on May 9th of 2016 for two little tiny towns down in Pontotoc County, two little tiny towns. We had never done one for little communities, but if this tornado had maintained its strength and gone over those communities, they would have been, the entire towns would have been hit by this, this mile-wide tornado. So we were confident. So do you grade us based on the forecaster confidence at the time that we issued the tornado emergency, or we're getting into a whole other show here, it feels like, but I don't know. This
is the topic. I actually want to swing back to Eli on this. We're talking about these issues are what I know working with the HAZCIMP program kept me up many nights. Because, you look at a system like Meteo Alarm, it sounds great. It has 4 tiers, but what about the case where there's a lot of uncertainty, where you could have a very catastrophic event, but the probability is quite low? That isn't something that fits extremely cleanly into their system, where red is supposed to be both for high confidence, it's high probability, but also high impact. You can have it could go down, slip down one of the colors to maybe an orange or even a yellow, depending on how low the probability is in their little matrix to end up with those 4 categories. So you may sort of bury the possibility of this very extreme event under that uncertainty. So when you're starting to talk about trying to make a system that makes sense, when you have all of these considerations, I'm personally of the opinion that I'd love to see a world where we can faithfully communicate all of these things, because every storm is its own unique story to some degree. And the more that we can communicate what we know about these and tell that story and not put ourselves in the confines of an overly simplistic system, the better off we'll be. That's really the art in all of this, is trying to strike this balance between a system that's very intuitive and very simple to use. Something like this consolidation process, I think, is very much moving that direction, but also something that allows the forecaster to say everything they want to say, like you were saying earlier, Eli. And sometimes those things don't move the same directions. And then that's, I think, Rick, the pressure you're feeling just in the case of the tornado emergency.
This is a great discussion, and Rick, one of the things you brought up about the tornado emergency for a small place. The holy grail for us is impact-based verification, not verification based necessarily only on lead time. These are important numbers, of course, false alarm, but the impact of how good was the forecast? How many lives did it save? How much money did it save? If we pre-positioned assets, how much money did that save? And it's extraordinarily difficult to do, and we're taking some stabs at it, and even in the World Meteorological Organization, this is identified as a big deal. But no one has any clear answers on how to do this. And so the issue about, all lives matter, right? And so a tornado emergency should be graded on the amount of damage it does to anybody, one could argue, although the initial definition, and I don't believe this is the current definition in the latest directive I saw, that it has to be striking a major urban area, and that it's imminent, and that it's a F4, et cetera. So these are all items for another show.
but for all three of you, do you think the use of the term tornado emergency reduces the effectiveness of a tornado warning, where people might ignore that because it's not an emergency?
I think that if you're going to use say a purple color or the word emergency or the word extreme, you've got to use it extremely sparingly. That's the point. This past summer's hurricanes, well, they were all emergencies, right? And so as weather gets more and more extreme, that's another challenge about how do you differentiate. And James, you're asking a very good question.
Yeah, and I'm guilty. I'll just say I'm guilty of throwing that out. And again, not often. I use it very rare. But for example, on April 27, 2011, we had John Olshu and Ben Greer on the Tuscaloosa EF4. And it was live on television, and without coordinating with the Weather Service, without coordinating with anybody else in town, I just said, this is a tornado emergency. And I don't know if that's the right thing to do, because it seems now that we need to somehow coordinate this like we do for watches and warnings. And I think I need to stop doing that. So I'm thinking out loud, but to me, that's the biggest struggle I have on the convective side, is what do you do with that? Are we overusing it? And I don't think we are. It's used sparingly here as well. But it's just something. Kim, you social scientists have to help us. Another question we have for you.
We do, and I think there could be a really wonderful natural experiment for some. If there's an enterprising graduate student in the social sciences who's listening and wants to do some work, you could look at the communities where there have been tornado emergencies issued and try to get a sense for whether they feel overwarned, if they're less likely to respond to regular tornado warnings. It's just find a place where some unusually high proportion of the warnings have been emergencies, and you can try to suss out that kind of an effect. So I think that'd make an amazing research project. But Eli, I do want to follow up. You were correct. The directive does not say that it has to be a high population area. I think what has been the discussion, I do want to correct that, and you're right. The discussion was, how do you interpret the directive? Because some folks have interpreted it that way. The directive is that there is a severe threat to human life. So that leaves a little bit of subjectivity. What defines a severe threat to human life? Is that a lot of lives? Is that I mean, what is it? Because it also couples it with catastrophic damage, imminent or ongoing tornado, which is the high probability, high severity piece.
I disagree with you completely. I think it's very clear that you would use it whenever you have those items right there. I don't know. I don't think there's much ambiguity at all.
Which to you, Brian, do you mean you think it's clearly an urban warning?
I don't think it's an urban-rural situation. You know, an EF5 is an EF5, whether it's in a rural environment or an urban environment. And yes, it'll kill more people where we're packed together more closely, but it's still a severe threat to human life, even if it's out in Coosa County, which is one of our least populated counties with a very low population density. It's still going to probably kill some people. Mm-hmm. So I don't think there's a whole lot of room for interpretation there. That's just my opinion, but.
I am very glad that Rick Smith has put this up. And for those watching the video version, we actually have the criteria, and as Kim has been talking about, it's ABC. A is a severe threat to human life, is imminent or ongoing. B, catastrophic damage is imminent or ongoing. Or C, reliable sources confirm tornado, either 1 or 2. And all these conditions, these criteria have to be met. And I'm glad this first time I've seen this, and I think I need to just kind of stick this on my wall and get it up in my mind. But I do agree with Brian. Brian, don't you think you just know? You just know. You know the condition of the atmosphere. You know what the atmosphere might produce that day. You've got live streams. You've got spotters. Right. You've got radar signatures. I think sometimes you just know.
Yeah, I think so. And I think these 3 criteria are very impartial. I mean, I don't think there's an urban-rural argument here. Now, Kim, you're the social scientist and I'm not, but as a meteorologist, you know, if I have these 3 conditions, I have no problem with going with tornado emergency, whether it is in my least populated county or it's in my most densely populated county. It's still all 3 of those things. And I think that that word emergency does convey a higher level of certainty in terms of the warning message itself.
Sure. And I'm curious to know, what do you see as the difference then between criteria 1 and 2, the severe threat to human life and catastrophic damage?
I don't think there's a lot of difference between those 2. I mean, because
that may be where some of the confusion arises, that they're sort of made separate. To me, if those are the same thing, which I can see how you would think those should just be the same thing.
Yeah, I don't see a lot of difference between those 2, because I mean, if you're getting catastrophic damage, obviously there's a severe threat to human life. I mean, so
right.
Yeah, I think they could be combined in just as A. Yes. I just don't want to have this competing thing between urban and rural. I think a forecaster, a meteorologist has the warning responsibility, if they are very confident of that with reliable sources and believe this is a severe threat to human life, I think you use it wherever the tornado event is occurring.
I'll be honest, though, when we did that one on May 9th of 2016 for down south of here about an hour, there was a little bit of, you know, when we kind of got our heads together and said, I think we want to go tornado emergency on this, there were some people in the office going, really? For this little Roth, Oklahoma town, Hickory, Oklahoma? And that was the first time we'd ever done that. So I think that mentality is definitely out there, that, you know, there is a perception among some that this is for when it's going through an urban area, a densely populated area, whatever that means. But you know,
and my point, Rick, is I don't think that should enter into it. You know, I mean, because it comes down to the same question that James asks all the time: is a life in the urban area more important than a life in the rural area? I mean, I understand population density plays a role in how many people we're probably going to kill with an EF5 or an EF4 tornado, but I just think we're doing everything we possibly can to get people to seek shelter. And even on a day like April 27, 2011, when the Weather Enterprise did a fantastic job, we still lost 252 people. So
And that's the goal of the warning system, is to get people to take action to protect
Bingo.
life. And for the people in Roth and Hickory, Oklahoma, little tiny towns or wherever, that's an emergency for them. If a 295 mile an hour, half mile, 3/4 mile wide tornado goes across their town, it's going to be a life-changing event and deadly, a serious, or whatever the wording says, threat to life and property with catastrophic damage. So.
Well, and
Brian,
I think there would become a problem if we were using this, willy-nilly without any considerations. I think it would become a problem, but I don't think we're doing that yet. Sorry, Eli.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. This is Brian. I'm really glad you brought this up. It's very important for me to hear. And as you've been talking, I've been thinking of an analog for a hurricane. A Cat 5 is a Cat 5. Doesn't really matter where it hits, right? It's kind of the same thing. There's highly, whether it hits Houston. I mean, well, the whole entire coastline is populated, of course. It's not a direct analog, but It's the same idea. And I hear what you're saying. It's important that I heard that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And you've heard. I don't even want to get into it, Brian. You've talked for me, but I have seen it over and over and over. There is a bias in the weather enterprise toward people that live in cities. Most meteorologists live in cities. I live in a city, but everybody on this show lives in a city or close to a city. And we honestly have gotten away from understanding that people do live 50, 60, 70 miles away. And just because they live that far out, that doesn't make their life any different than anybody in a city. And we treat them differently. Televisions, and what grinds my gear, and I don't want to get off the rails here, but it's these TV stations, these heroic TV stations that go wall to wall. We cover severe weather. If it's for the counties in the metro where they've got all these meters, that determine the ratings, they'll be on for that. The minute it gets out of the metro, they go back to Freak of the Week or whatever's on television, and they do not provide coverage for people in rural areas. And that's a very dangerous game to play. And I don't understand it. It's very frustrating. And it's that way in most of the country. So having said that, Bill Murray, I'm sorry. We hijacked your interview. Sorry.
No, I love it. That's exactly why we had Eli here tonight. And I'm glad we went there. So Eli, there was a survey sent out a few weeks ago talking with some maps and showing some different examples of probability and use of probabilistic information. Any early results from that survey?
We've sent out a few different surveys. Are you talking about the probabilistic snow experiment?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, so that experiment continues. It started off at Sterling, and it's a model where it's a very interesting way to uncertainty, where for snowfall, there's one panel that says expect at least this much past, which is the 50th percentile, and the 90th percentile is it wouldn't be more than this much, or expect this is the most you could get. Figured exactly what the language is. And so that's been gradually expanding across the country, and emergency managers seem to like it. There's some debate about the language used and whether that's an effective way to express uncertainty. But that's our biggest challenge, of course, especially or particularly with snowstorms. And so that's a project that's gotten a lot of traction.
So Eli, what's the official definition of probability from our standpoint?
Kim, help.
That is the $64,000. Maybe that's the $1 million question. It can mean just about anything, and the real deal, is really making sure that you use a definition that makes sense to people and is intuitive, because we, thus far as a winter enterprise, haven't cared about that terribly a lot, especially with our marquee product, the probability of precipitation. You go out on the street, talk to people, ask them what that means. Very few people are going to get what does probability mean here correct. Right. And we want to be sure that as we go toward this future where we're better able to estimate forecast uncertainty, because we have ensembles, we have an ensemble of ensembles. I mean, we're starting to get a richness and wealth of guidance on what those potential futures could look like. We need to be sure that when we open Pandora's box, we don't just let out so much that people are quite confused. We're hitting up on that in the hazardous weather test bed here when we brought in emergency managers and broadcasters and forecasters to work on some of the severe products that we're developing. So we can have the probability of, say, a tornado occurring over the next hour or a storm producing severe hazards. The probabilities mean the probability of meeting or exceeding severe criteria. But there are a lot of folks who want to communicate, well, I'm very confident that we'll stay at advisory level criteria, or whatever we end up calling that, Eli. But that's something that's not quite severe, but they want people to know about it because it could have impacts. And we're thinking, that's something similar to what you're doing in snow, where you're saying expect at least this much, it could be this much, and as much as this much, and trying to assign probabilities to each of those things. You might end up in a situation where you get very complicated very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So Elon, there's also two parallel tracks. You've got a continuum of information that you're trying to convey from the outlook all the way through the extreme warning. How do you handle the color coding of the outlooks in terms of this continuum? Do they all just stay yellow? We were faced with that in our decision, and we had to use one color for all outlooks, and then the words themselves, how extreme that threat was for that day. So is that part of the process you have to worry about too?
So here's a whole nother show. And I know this.
I'm good with filling out my dance card for the next 3 months. I like it.
Well, and I know this is something that James feels passionately about. So we have all kinds of use of color, and think about the types of parameters we have to use color for. We have color curves for individual hazards, like heat and cold. We have threat, we have risk, we have impact, we have deviation from climatology, and we have severity. So, and there's different, very well-intentioned projects that use color things. And so I've really come to the conclusion, just like, the watch warning system is confusing, but because people think that the three terms are hierarchical in nature, and they're not. Sure that you can use any one. I think you have to agree on color codes for discrete types of parameters. So I would recommend that for severity, we all agree on a set color coding for that. And then, how you deal with certainty, I'm not sure. I think we could probably also do well by agreeing on a distinct set of colors that everyone uses for color curves. 12 to 18 inches of snow is always the same color. I don't know which one it is, but it's always the same one. So very complicated, but the use of color is something we are testing primarily with severity. And to me, and that's maybe just my bias, but I think it's the first imperative to get the colors for severity straight. And if there is an alternative to watch, warning, and advisory that involves color, kind of where it lies. And then the certainty, as you correctly point out, Bill, is a different ball of wax. And at our HAZTEMP workshop, prototypes that we got had blue for a longer range outlook and yellow for a shorter term outlook. So, these are interesting ideas.
Eli, do you hope to get all broadcasters to follow the lead and agree on these colors?
Well, I guess I would put it this way, that at our very first social science engagement with broadcasters, and it was really very interesting, one broadcaster said, if the Weather Service led the way, then we may all follow you if it's something that all makes sense. But I think, we're sticking with our mission right now. We're trying to get our products straight. And if we get all of our products straight in terms of color and how they're used for all those different variables I rattled off a minute ago, I think that's the first step.
So Eli, do you see a day when the word watch will go out of our vocabulary? Well,
I sort of hold that as a possibility. not to coin a pun, but I think advisory in particular, that's the one that really very, very few people understand. And we're in our generalizable survey that I mentioned, we are being various terms. So it's possible we might lose advisory and keep watch. It's possible we might lose both advisory and watch. I don't ever envision losing warning. That's our mission. It's possible we may not change at all. I mean, the consolidation and reformatting we originally called as, kind of a repair, a low-hanging fruit. But I'm learning more and more as I get deeper into this project. None of this is simple, and it all can be very controversial, and it could all be problematic, and we have to be very, very careful about it.
I noticed one thing in the process of the new winter messages that you mentioned that attribution was removed, and I guess that means removing the actual National Weather Service office mention in the initial sentence of the product. Is that for brevity, or is that for more of a unified message from the Weather Service?
Well, the Weather Service attribution is still at top by the office that's issuing it. It's just that what was happening is we were saying the same thing twice. The Department of Redundancy Department, as one of my colleagues says. So that was the goal there. But yeah, I mean, it's still the Weather Service product, and clearly is being issued from the Weather Service. So.
And one last thing before I let James take it and run with it, Eli. You mentioned briefly working, with an organization, and you had to mean the WMO. We don't talk about that organization very often. Talk about where it's at right now and what your involvement is with it, and how it's important and relevant today.
The WMO, well, the World Meteorological Organization is part of the United Nations, and it has, I don't have the exact number, but a great number of member countries that participate. And of course, since meteorology is a global enterprise, and as some point out, it may be the only area in global enterprise where we can all work together and really make it all work. I mean, the continuum of observations and models is critical, as we all know, to making the whole system work. And so, but really what the mission of the WMO is to help developing countries come up to levels where they can better protect their public. And so actually what my group does, which is based on impact-based and warnings and early warning systems in general, but which is, in our case, the watch warning advisory system, is to enable them to and provide the capability and the capacity that they need to start evolving so that they can serve their public. So it's very rewarding work and very interesting. The thing that's so interesting to me is how all of the more developed countries are going down the same path that we in the Weather Service, in terms of what we call Weather Ready Nation and impact-based decision support and all that. I mean, it's all about the impact. It's what the weather will do, not what the weather will be, and that's a key line in one of the reports that I helped to draft.
Well, Eli, you are so kind to come on the show. You've been here for over 1 hour. We know you're a very busy person. You're welcome to stay until the end. We got about 20 more minutes here, but thanks so much for being with us and answering all these questions. And we have a lot of food for thought, but your job is hard. I mean, it is hard. I would not sleep at night if I had your job. So
well, why do you think I'm up talking to you? Hey, can I blow the panel's mind?
Oh, you're already up.
Yeah, go. Blow our mind. Go.
Our director, Dr. Uccellini, has said to me that a blizzard is a really a mesoscale phenomena embedded in synoptic scale lore. So think about blizzards as small mesoscale banded features, perhaps even convective in nature. What would you think about the idea of issuing blizzards as an impact-based warning superimposed upon a larger winter storm warning? I mean, the other alternative is to consider consolidating a blizzard warning into winter storm warning. And and by the way, and I realize that these are the important terms. These are our institutional terms: blizzard, flash flood, hurricane. Using the headline, and perhaps we shouldn't. I mean, I'm not suggesting that we necessarily should, but the one thing I would cite is, as we're seeing, as we saw last year with blizzards that occurred, might our forecasters be able to issue their messages sooner if they are enabled to issue a winter storm watch and say blizzard conditions possible, which they're doing now. That's part of our new system, rather than holding on to decide whether it should be a blizzard watch. And that's part of what this consolidation is geared towards. Don't worry so much about which product you're going to issue. Focus on the messaging impact that you have. But I'll leave you with the idea of an impact-based mesoscale blizzard warning. I mean, one of the problems with it is you might be issuing a whole bunch of them because blizzard conditions can be a much larger winter storm. But just a thought.
Yeah, and thankfully, most of us on the show here, we're low latitude people down here, so we don't have to think too much about that one because it doesn't happen that often. But it does. It's happened in the past. But again, Eli, thanks so much. We appreciate you coming on the show, and thanks for all your work. And again, you're welcome to sit with us. And if you got to go, you take off. We've got to take a very quick break here. Let's see, Aubrey, have you got email ready to go here?
I do.
I see that you are happening to be there. Let's get you out of the way here, and let's check the good old email inbox and see what's in there.
Letters. We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
Oh yeah, let's get Aubrey out of the way. Let's go ahead. Let's just move her along.
He didn't mean it that way, Aubrey.
You got to be on the news. You got to be on the news. Yeah.
I'm just teasing. Yes, actually, I only have one email tonight, and this is it's a good email from Devin Greeny. I believe I pronounced that right, Devin. As we approach the 50th anniversary of April 4th, 1968, the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., a few know about the strange weather event that played into the tragedy. So I'll kind of read this for the whole. King was in Memphis on Monday, March 18th, so that's a couple weeks before, in support of striking sanitation workers. He left for Mississippi and then Atlanta, but announced he would return on March 22nd to coincide with a demonstration to support striking sanitation employees. But at about 4:30 on March 21st, snow began falling at the Weather Bureau at the airport. On and off for the next 19 hours, more than 16 inches fell, then another just over an inch. It became the second largest snowfall in history for the city. Since that time, the city recorded at most about half that amount, just for fun facts. Now, with the airports closed on the night of March 21st, King had to delay his visit. The demonstration was rescheduled for March 28th and went violently, so King stayed to try and calm things down. On April 3rd, James Earl Ray, who later pled guilty to killing King, arrived in Memphis. Now, had it not been for the snowfall, maybe possible, there's a good chance King would not have been in town April 4th when he was assassinated. So definitely a very interesting email. And thanks, Devin, for submitting that and also sending in, he attached a paper with citations for an interesting topic. So we appreciate that. And that is actually all I have. That's all the email I have, unless I missed something, but I kind of just skimmed through and I didn't see anything. You can always submit your emails to email@weatherbrains.com. Love to hear interesting weather topics, any guest suggestions with also some contact information. If you have a show topic that you would like to see, go ahead and submit that email at weatherbrains.com. And we would love to hear your comments. Don't forget to follow us on the Facebook and the Twitter.
Awesome. So it looks like I got to go rewrite a forecast package here. This is the time of the year we do Toys for Tots here. And so I've been out doing live stuff all afternoon, and the new modeling is coming in, and it really is not jiving up with our ongoing public forecast here. So we're going to take a break and roll Professor Peters and then Tony Rice in the astronomy report. And Bill Murray, I'm going to let you pick it up because I got to run next door and rework a forecast here. So we got much more to go. Picks of the week, the weather roundup, and a whole lot more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
WeatherBrains 101 with Professor Peters.
It's now December, so we've technically entered meteorological winter, which is comprised of December, January, and February. Yes, I know. The official start of winter does not really come until December 21st, as marked by the travel of the sun. But what meteorologist in his right mind wants to deal with partial months, hence meteorological winter? Most precipitation that forms in wintertime clouds will start out as snow due to the top portions of the storm being usually cold enough to create snowflakes. Snowflakes are just collections of ice crystals that cling to each other as they fall toward the ground. Precipitation continues to fall as snow when the temperature remains at or below 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius from the cloud base to the ground. We define several instances of snowfall based on elements besides just the snow itself. Snow flurries are light snow falling for short durations. No accumulation or perhaps a light dusting is all that is expected. Snow showers occur when snow is falling at varying intensities for brief periods of time. Some accumulation is possible depending in part on the duration of the snow shower. Snow squalls are similar to snow showers, but somewhat stronger. These are brief, intense snow showers accompanied by strong, gusty wind. Accumulation may be significant. Snow squalls are probably best known in the Great Lakes region. Blowing snow is wind-driven snow that reduces visibility and causes significant drifting. Blowing snow may be snow that is falling, combined with any loose snow on the ground picked up by the wind. And finally, there is the snow that falls in a blizzard. A blizzard combines wind over 35 miles an hour with snow and blowing snow occurring, reducing the visibility to 1/4 of a mile or less for at least 3 hours. And probably everyone listening to this episode of WeatherBrains has seen all of the winter weather advisories occurring across the north central United States with the latest storm system. Got a question about the weather? Drop an email to question@weatherbrains.com.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
Please stop saying supermoons are rare. Well, they don't happen every month. They aren't as rare as is often suggested. Supermoon is a full moon that is at or near about 90% of its closest point in its orbit around Earth, or perigee. It's also a term that was coined by an astrologer, not an astronomer. 2017 only had one supermoon. That occurred this last weekend. That seems like it's a pretty rare event. But it also begins the first of 3, straddling the new year, December 3rd, January 1st, and January 31st. Why don't these happen more often? Well, the time between perigees, also called an anomalistic month, is about 27.56 days. That doesn't line up very well with the time between full moons, a synodic month, which is about 29.53 days. The next supermoon occurs on January 1st, with the final of the year just a few weeks later on January 31st. That one has some extra superlatives. The second full moon in a month is known as a blue moon. January 31st, I can get a blue total eclipse moon. And that might seem like the ultimate unicorn of astronomical events. But we just saw something similar back in September of 2015. That's your Astronomy Outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokey for more spacey stuff like this.
Always look forward to Tony Rice's report each week. Always has great information in there. I just scratched out. I won't say the supermoon is a rare event anymore. Brian Peters, what is this cryptic weather that has driven James to the studio? Is there a snow shower involved?
Beats me. I don't think the models are coming in quite as cold.
Okay,
So
all right.
That may be
good.
what he has to revise. So, still going to be chilly.
Well, we will. It will. It won't be quite not below freezing on Saturday at least. Hopefully, that's
Probably not.
good news.
So,
that sounds pretty miserable. Well, it's that time of the week when we go around the table and get our picks of the week. Eli, you've been awfully nice to stay up all night with us here. I know that Kim may have stolen your pick of the week, but I'm going to give you the chance to give it first.
All right. Hey, thanks for inviting me. I've really enjoyed this. So actually, my pick of the week is a quiz. What is brontophobia?
Ooh. Do we have any takers on the panel?
Well, it's also known as astrophobia, chronophobia, or tonotrophobia.
Is astrophobia the fear of thunder?
Very good. Yeah, it's actually the irrational fear of thunder and lightning.
Knew it.
There you go. All right.
We did a little series on some weather fears a couple years ago.
So, Rick Smith, do you know what brontophobia is?
It is the irrational fear of thunder and lightning.
Oh, that's it. Okay. I'm sorry. I thought there was 2 different words.
No, the irrational fear of lightning and thunder has got a lot of names.
Yeah.
So it has multiple names.
Those were all names for the same thing.
Yeah.
I got you. That's pretty
Can
cool.
We get a little consolidation on that?
Yeah, that's project for you.
Needs to be simplified.
So Eli, did you draw the short straw at the office in order to get this project? Because it looks like it's a pretty daunting task.
This project? No. No, that this is all of my self-infliction.
Oh, good for you. Good for you. Well, thank you for joining us tonight. It's been great having you on here, and you're welcome back anytime. And with all the shows you propose doing in the future, you might become a permanent panelist. So watch out.
Oh, okay. Well, I'd enjoy that. Thanks a lot, everybody. Enjoyed working with y'all.
Thank you.
All right. Well, now while I've got Aubrey on here, Aubrey, I'm going to ask you for your pick of the week if you can talk.
Yes, I can. My pick of the week is called Devastation on the Delaware. And it is by, let me get the author, Mary Schaefer. This is about Hurricanes Connie and Diane. And the author actually sent me a copy because I did a little piece about some hurricane history earlier this summer during hurricane season. And she was Googling Connie and Diane and found my piece and sent me the book. So it is on my reading list next to read. And I know it's going to be a great book, some interesting weather history, a couple lesser known storms, but more known across the Northeast. So some back-to-back storms. So that is my pick.
That was a bad year in the Northeast. Bad 2 years. Brian Peters, do you remember those storms?
Actually, believe it or not, I don't. I was too young.
Too young.
No, that
can't be born 1955. You weren't born yet, right?
No, I was born yet, but that was further north.
Yeah.
And so media coverage was not what it is today.
No, it's a little different today, isn't it? So, Brian Peters, what's your pick of the week?
My pick is, and this is especially since we had Eli on, is I wanted to focus on weather-ready ambassadors, which WeatherBrains is, and so is ABC 3340 here in Birmingham. And so I have a link to what weather-ready ambassadors are and what they do.
Outstanding. And do you think we use that term enough on the show, Brian?
Probably not. We probably could be a little more vocal about it.
But I think we do embody that.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. No doubt about that at all.
And that's going to be my pick of the week this week is Mark Jelenic, good friend, and who runs the What Is It About the Weather podcast, has sent us a survey that he wants our listeners to take. So we would invite all our listeners to take the survey that Brian has the link for. It will be in the show notes. And it talks about how our podcast influences people's decisions and readiness for hazardous weather. He's going to be presenting at AMS in Austin in January, and we'll probably have him on in a few weeks to talk about what he's doing, but he wanted us to share that with our listeners. So I'd encourage you all to go out and take that survey and come back and we'll see sort of what Mark has to say about that. So that's going to be my pick of the week, Brian. So Kevin Selly, can you talk?
Yes, absolutely. Sort of a generic one. I often go to boston.com/big picture for a given weather event, but I'm just going to give it generically because if you scroll back over the past several weeks, there have been so many weather events, and they've got hurricane stuff and fire in California stuff and autumn stuff. And I think one of the nice things is they're not forgetting some of the impacted areas in the hurricanes. You know, they're going back not just right after the storms, but going back sometime later and looking at things. So give them credit for that. It's boston.com/big picture.
Outstanding. I was watching.
And thanks to Eli too. I just want to thank you personally because it's a huge task, as they've already said, but you're just brave to do it because it doesn't matter what you do, you're going to get arrows from somebody. And I think it takes a particular kind of brave personality to do that. So thanks for doing that.
Nice of you to say, Kevin. Thank you. I've always been a masochist.
I think this is one of those HGTV shows because I always enjoy watching the different beaches they profile. And they profiled Mustang Island in Texas, which is just east of Padre Island or northeast of it in the Corpus Christi area, and I'm sure it was impacted terribly by Hurricane Harvey. And I was wondering, I know that show was shot in 2016, so it probably, unfortunately, looks a lot different there today. So we keep all the folks in all the hurricane-ravaged areas in our thoughts and prayers tonight. Kim Kloko, you probably had the showcase pick of the week, and it looks like you get to keep it, so share it with us.
Woohoo! Excited. So I have shared the homepage for the Hazard Simplification Project. And if you go to the homepage, pretty timely, there's actually a little video you can watch that gives you the rundown on the winter product change. So if you aren't familiar with all the ins and outs of everything we've been talking about tonight, all the details can be found there. And you should use your Weather Service homepage to follow the storms and see how you feel about the simplification project. And if you have feedback, there is actually a place to leave it also on the homepage. We'd love to hear from you.
You know, that actually reminds me of another question I had when I was away, but what are the methods going to be to get these changes to the broadcasters, since I'm a broadcaster, but I mean, broadcasters in general, one of the larger voices. Is this going to fall, Eli, to people like Rick to communicate with all the television stations in his CWA? Well,
you know, I'm glad you brought that up, Kevin. So first of all, I'm always going around to the conferences, presenting and collecting feedback, and I've been going to the AMS Broadcast Conference each year. But we also have back at headquarters, we have a broadcasters mailing list, and we always go through the WCMs who send it out to all their mailing lists if we have a survey or we have new information. So presuming that you have contact with your WCM, and if not, I can certainly help you do that. You know, you should be hearing from them as to how to provide feedback.
Yeah, I kind of know mine. He's in a little thumbnail, little thumbnail down there. I'm in Rick's CWA.
Oh, I just stepped in it. Okay.
Yeah, you can just reach behind Kim and hit him on the head right there. Yeah, and you'll be all right.
Yeah.
Outstanding. So we'll come to Rick Smith. Rick, what's your pick of the week?
Mine is from the climate.gov website. As we head into a La Nina winter, they have a interesting blog post there about what happens across the nation with snow during La Nina winter. And there are no bullseye maps that show 45 inches anywhere, or no 384-hour GFS images. Just some science about what typically happens during La Nina winters as far as snow goes. I know that's on a lot of people's minds as we head into deeper into December.
It's outstanding. So Brian Peters, did we have a pick of the week from James?
We do. He actually has an article about how leeches were used to predict the weather. I'm anxious to read that one.
Okay. Well, when we start using leeches again, I'm going to be worried.
Right?
So any other information we want to bring before the weather?
Uh-oh.
Lost Eli?
No.
He's frozen.
Lost Bill.
Time.
We lost Bill for a moment.
There we go. There.
That's you.
Oh no. Yeah, my internet is hanging on by a thread here. So I better talk quickly. Eli, anything you want to add?
No, other than to say thanks for having me, and hope to come back again and give you an update.
Well, you've got a standing invite. You come back anytime. Kevin, anything from you?
Nope, ready to go. We're about a few seconds from air, so I'll see you.
There you go. Bye, Kevin. Kim, anything to add? Good, Kim. Or maybe I'm muted.
No, I can't hear her either. I can't hear you, Kim.
She's got the symbol on, but she's not hearing.
She does.
Yeah.
So, Brian, how about you? Anything else?
I'm looking forward to some cold weather.
All right, Rick,
now,
you're gonna have some.
She's unmuted now.
Go back to Kim. I think she figured out what was going on.
Kim.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. Sorry about that. I was going to say, Eli, you need to talk to Jen and John and tell them that we are friendly here. I've been trying to get them to come on the show to talk about the Academy study and what they're planning to do with it. And I don't know if they're just anxious, but you can just go down the hall, tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, they're good people. You can talk to them. They're good.
You got it. I'll do that.
That'd be great.
Great to see you.
It helps if they haven't listened to the show, Eli. That helps too. So, Rick Smith, anything you want to add before we sign off?
I have nothing. I think it's been a great show. Thanks, Eli, for coming on. Always good to hear the latest. And we will talk to you when you look forward to having you on again and get some updates as we go through the process.
Hope to see some of you at AMS at least.
I hope.
If
Noah in Southern Region say I can go, I'll be there. So.
Okay.
Hopefully I will be tied up on that Monday night if Alabama Crimson Tide that got in by the sliver of a thread last night still survives maybe to meet Oklahoma or Georgia.
Right? Yeah, you and I might be.
That could be. And Brian may be the new football coach at Florida State before this is all over.
Oh, wow. That's a stretch.
OU fans are going to be at AMS if we get that far. I'm pretty excited about watching an OU football game in Austin, Texas. I don't know about anybody else, but
the ultimate irony. That's the ultimate irony for sure. So, guess that's it for tonight's show. Thanks to Eli for joining us. Thanks to everybody, all the panelists that were on. The great interaction there. Appreciate that very much. Next week, the non-retiring Steve Weiss will be our guest. Since I unfortunately sped his retirement up to the present time from some bad information I had somewhere along the way. But Steve is not retiring, and he will be with us next week, and we'll be honored to have him in our presence. But until then, WeatherBrains is the weekly netcast that's all about weather. We do it on Monday nights, except for the next few weeks. It's going to get kind of jumbled when the live shows will be, but they'll come out into the natural world on their normal Monday nights. Greg Carbon's going to join us, Pam Heinzelman, and we've got some great shows coming up all the way into January and February, so we hope you'll join us for all of those. But until next week, when Steve Weiss is our guest, I'm Bill Murray saying good night for the entire WeatherBrains week group, and have a great week.
Thank you, Eli.
Hey, good night, everybody.
Thanks, Eli.
Outstanding. It's great to chat with you again.
Yes, it's that time where we say goodbye. So we're in the middle of our 10 o'clock news here. We'll be on Song of the Night in just a second. Thank you guys for watching the video version on the YouTube here. Great to have Eli on the show. Very interesting discussion, a good discussion. And I got to go because we've got some TV going on here. So we'll see you guys over on Song of the Night on my Twitter feed in a minute. And if not, we'll see you on WeatherBrains here next Monday night. Thank you all for watching. Have a great weekend. God bless.